in 6. Chant Hare Krishna and 5. Prabhupada speaking. It is not imposing, it is good philosophy. We are canvassing. Take it, you will be benefited. And they are being benefited. Those who are reading, they are being benefited. And why are you advertising big signboards? Please come and purchase. Why are you imposing your so-called goodness on us? Why are you doing? Back and forth the battle went hour after hour. Rameshwar unleashing all the arguments against the Krishna conscious movement. And Srila Prabhupada defeating them. Prabhupada called the arguments childish and foolish, and he strongly criticized the materialistic demeanor from which they sprang. By Shastra and logic he proved that the non-devotee has no good qualities and is less than an animal because of his lack of God consciousness. Such a person, he said, was in no position to criticize, and such criticisms only showed ignorance of the real purpose of life. The train stopped in Manmad, Jalagon and Khandwa, as well as other small towns and junctions, and for Prabhupada and his disciples the day passed quickly in discussion. Prabhupada was absorbed in defending the Krishna consciousness movement. He relished fighting on behalf of Lord Krishna. He was speaking, of course, mainly for the benefit of his disciples, but beyond that he was expressing his compassion for all beings and his dedication to the Krishna conscious movement. They are spending so much for military strength, Prabhupada continued. They are not performing yajna, so how will there be rainfall? There will be warfare, devastation. It is the most rubbish civilization. They are misleading everyone, soul killing. It is the blind leading the blind. Even when there is difficulty, we have to do this as Krishna's business. Let the dogs bark on, we don't care. If we remain sincere to Krishna, that is our victory. The external result is not so important. We have to act according to the direction of Krishna. Of course, we want to see good results, but even if there is no good result, we don't mind. We must be sincere to Krishna, that we have done our best without cheating. That is our duty. As servants, we shall not cheat the master, result or no result. The devotee is not sorry if there is no result. Never mind, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, I have brought to Benares the Harinam, but here they are all Mayavadis. So if it is not accepted, all right, I shall take it back. But we must do our canvassing work. Please take it. That is our mission. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada speaking trailed off into chanting Javat. He would chant for a while and then bring up another point. Rameshwara Swami continued to stir the controversies, anxious to fortify his own convictions and preaching ability by hearing directly from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Javat. Shishukodanitai Mai Pusha Shiki Javat. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 12, Rahugana converses with Javat, Text 10. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Evam Krisham Stulam Anu Brihad Yad. Evam Krishnam Stulam Anu Brihad Yad. Evam Krisham Stulam Anu Brihad Yad. Such Jivam Ajivam Anyat. Such Jivam Ajivam Anyat. Such Jivam Ajivam Anyat. Dravya Svabhavashaya Kala Karma. Dravya Svabhavashaya Kala Karma. Dravya Svabhavashaya Kala Karma. Namna Javahehi. Namna Jayavehi. Kritam Tritiyam. Namna Jayavehi Kritam Tritiyam. Namna Jayavehi Kritam Tritiyam. Evam Krisham Stulamano Brihadyat. Such Jivam Ajivam Anyat. Dravya Svabhavashaya Kala Karma. Namna Jayavehi Kritam Tritiyam. Evam Krisham Stulamano Brihadyat. Such Jivam Ajivam Anyat. Dravya Svabhavashaya Kala Karma. Namna Jayavehi Kritam Tritiyam. Evam Krisham Stulamano Brihadyat. Such Jivam Ajivam Anyat. Dravya Svabhavashaya Kala Karma. Namna Jayavehi Kritam Tritiyam.
Evam Krisham Stulamano Brihadyat.
Evam Krisham Stulamano Brihadyat.
Asascha Jivam Ajivam Anyat.
Jivam Ajivam Anyat.
Dravya Svabhavashaya Kala Karma. Namna Jayavehi Kritam Tritiyam.
Evam Krisham Stulamano Brihadyat.
Evam Krisham Stulamano Brihadyat.
Asat Jivam Ajivam Anyat.
Jivam Ajivam Anyat.
Dravya Svabhavashaya Kala Karma. Namna Jayavehi Kritam Tritiyam. Evam Krisham Stulamano Brihadyat.
Evam Krisham Stulamano Brihadyat. Such Jivam Ajivam Anyat.
Dravya Swabhava Sayakala Karma
Dravya Svabhava Shayakala Karma
Namna Jaya Vehi Kitam Vichidya
Namna Jaya Vehi Kritam Dvitiyam Evam Thus Prisham Skinny or short
Skinny or short.
Stulam Fat Anu Tiny Brihat Big Yat Which Asat Impermanent Cha and Sat Existing Jivam the living entities Ajivam inanimate lifeless matter and yet other causes Dravya phenomena Svabhava nature Ashaya disposition Kala time Karma activities Namna only by such names Ajaya by material nature Avehi you should understand Kritam done Dvitiyam duality Translation Since this universe has no real ultimate existence, the things within it, shortness, differences, grossness, skinniness, smallness, bigness, result, cause, living symptoms and materials, are all imagined. They are all parts made of the same substance, earth, but they are named differently. The differences are characterized by the substance, nature, predisposition, time and activity. You should know that all these are simply mechanical manifestations created by material nature. Please repeat. Since this universe has no real ultimate existence,
Since this universe has no real ultimate existence,
the things within it, shortness, differences, grossness, skinniness, smallness, bigness, result, cause, living symptoms, and materials are all imagined. They are all parts made of the same substance, earth, but they are named differently. The differences are characterized by the substance, nature, predisposition, time and activity. You should know that all these are simply mechanical manifestations created by material nature. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. The temporary manifestations and varieties within this material world are simply creations of material nature under various circumstances. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani savasha. The actions and reactions carried out by the material nature are sometimes accepted as our scientific inventions. Therefore, we want to take credit for them and defy the existence of God. This is described in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 27. Ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. Due to being covered by the illusory external energy, the living entity tries to take credit for the differentiated creations within the material world. Actually, all these are being created automatically by the material force set in motion by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the ultimate cause is the Supreme Person. As stated in Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchit Ananda Vigraha Anadi Radhi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes, the ultimate cause. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya says, Evam Savam Tata Prakrit Vayai Kalpitam Vishnu Anyat Evam Prakritya Dara Swayam Ananyadaro Vishnu Eva Ata Sava Shabdascha Tasmine Va. Actually, the original cause is Lord Vishnu, but out of ignorance, people think that matter is the cause of everything. Raja Gupta Shrayo Bhumi Sharanam Cheti Lokika Vyavaharo Natats Satyam Tayo Brahma Shrayo Vibhu. Things are contemplated on the ephemeral or external platform, but actually this is not the truth. The actual protector in charge of everyone is Brahman, the Supreme, not the king. Not the king. Goptri chatasya prakritis tasya Vishnu swayam prabhu tava goptri tu prithivi natram gopta shite shmita ata sava shrayais jaiva gopta cha hari ishvara sava shabda dideyascha shabda vrite karanam savantara savavahi eka eva janadana. The actual protectorate, the actual protectress is the material nature, but Vishnu is her Lord. He is the Lord of everything. Lord Janardhan is the director both externally and internally. He is the cause of the function of words and what is expressed in all sound. Shira so darata yadvad grivayas tadvadevatu ashrayatvam chagoptritvam anyesham upacharata. Lord Vishnu is the resting place of the entire creation. Brahmano hi pratishtaham. Bhagavad Gita chapter 14 verse 27. On Brahman everything is resting. All the universes are resting on the Brahma Jyoti, and all the planets are resting on the universal atmosphere. In each and every planet there are oceans, hills, states and kingdoms, and each planet is giving shelter to so many living entities. They are all standing on the earth of feet and legs, torso and shoulders, but actually everything is resting ultimately on the potencies of the Supreme Personality Godhead. Therefore He is known ultimately as Sarva Karana Karanam, the cause of all causes. Omagyanatimarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Meritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Sabhadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Shakanvitam Shah. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapsakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchikalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhuyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Sari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. When we were reading in Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, Srila Prabhupada referred to the arguments of the materialists as being childish and foolish. and this purport reminds me of Srila Prabhupada explaining that statement to his disciples, Srila Prabhupada was explaining to his disciples why he calls the arguments of the materialists, including highly respected academics and scientists, why he calls these childish. And he gives the example of a child when he's young, especially a child living in a city, for example, the child thinks that everything is just going on automatically. He's not aware of the complex arrangement provided by the administration of the local government and the national government. He's not aware of like the threats that are posed by disease, like pandemics, and he's not aware of the threats posed by other diseases, by potential climate change disasters, or he's not aware of all of the complex arrangements that are there in the infrastructure of the society. He's not aware of the sewage or of the electricity or any of those things. So he's just thinking that things go on normally, and that life is not really, doesn't require a great deal of serious endeavour, that he can just play. He can just play. And so just in that, just as that child is very foolish, that child is foolish. Srila Prabhupada says all human beings are born in ignorance, and they require education in many different branches of education to become free from that foolishness. So similarly, to understand the fundamental nature of the universe, we as children, as foolish children, then we need to understand all of the complex arrangements that are there in the universe to maintain things as they are. And so in these verses, Srila Prabhupada is quoting from the Shastra, he's quoting from, we don't actually know what Shastra, he's quoting from the Vedas, from the Puranas, from our Acharyas, from the Brahma Samhita. In all these Shastras it describes a very intricate and complex arrangement for maintaining the balance in the universe between all of the different living entities. And Srila Prabhupada quotes from Shastra, and actually it's, unless we study this Shastra, we won't be able to understand that complexity. Similarly, if you really want to understand how the government is managing the affairs of a city, for example, then you have to do a lot of study. If you want to get a post in government, you need to have a good understanding of civil engineering, of sociology, of public health, and you need an understanding of the processes of government, the kind of hierarchy of government. You need an understanding of all of these things, and it'll take many years to attain a level of proficiency. So similarly, to understand the nature of the energies and their interaction of the different energies of this universe actually takes many lifetimes. The amount, and even our great acharyas, like in one sense, the head of our educational establishment over many, many generations is Brahma. So it's described that Brahma had to study the Vedas 3 times before he could understand it. And then his lifespan was much longer than ours. So we're not actually, although we mustn't be like foolish children and remain in ignorance, but also we have to accept that we will not be able to understand all the details of the whole picture. It's not possible for us to do so. Or if we're really determined, if that is our nature, that we have to understand everything in detail before we're willing to devote our allegiance to the system, then we have to accept it's going to take many lifetimes. We can take that path if we like, but it's a very risky path to take, especially in the present age, because part of understanding that system is understanding that just as in material government and in material engineering and in the nature of the ecosystems of the planet, there's one of the eternal laws of these systems is entropy, which means that there's like a constant escape, like some of the energy escapes from the system, and therefore there's decay, there's deterioration, and it requires constant input to actually maintain the balance of the system. So that's also going on in the universal system, and from time to time there's decay. And so we're in a time of decay now. We're in a time of decay of health, of like the living entities. We're in a time of decay of knowledge and of memory and of intelligence and of morality. So, and this particular time of decay is called Kali Yuga. And in Kali Yuga, because we're harassed by all of these different adversities, then we haven't got the time to invest into studying the complexities of the universal order. So therefore, our acharyas have given the essence in this book, the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the Srimad Bhagavatam essentially is not about, it's not about universal order and infrastructure. The Srimad Bhagavatam is actually about attaining the goal of all lives, attaining love for God, attaining complete detachment from the material body, from the material condition, and it's presented to enable us to absorb ourselves in the superior spiritual energy. But in the course of reading the Bhagavatam, then by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and by the mercy of our acharyas, our previous teachers, then we're also given an opportunity to have a glimpse into the universal infrastructure. So if we have a very good brain, and we're very, and we've also got the advantage of youth perhaps, and we're very good at understanding how things are presented in different languages or in different terminology, then we can study like the nature of the universe. But there's a danger that we could get distracted because it's an almost endless pursuit, and we'll encounter lots of controversies, you could say, or lots of moral dilemmas, ethical dilemmas, because it's because different communities within the universe, just as on this planet, different countries, different cultures, different communities, there are different stages of development, and it's not really possible to create a political system which will actually keep everyone happy. So similarly, that's also there in the universe, and therefore the Bhagavatam doesn't claim to be able to do that. In fact, it says it's an impossible task. That's the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna's teaching to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita is stressing that it's not possible to find peace in the material world, because the very nature of the material world is that it's turbulent, it's ever-changing, and it's characterized by death, old age, disease, and birth. So birth, you may think, well, why is birth a bad thing? But birth is a bad thing because even if you can, with great patience and determination and self-sacrifice, even if you can create a kind of stalemate or an armistice or a truce in society, and perhaps get all the different parties to agree with each other to be peaceful, still new living beings are coming into existence, and they're bringing with them their selfish desires. The children are always selfish. It doesn't matter how advanced the society is that children are born into. Children are not born angels, and they're born childish. They don't understand why they can't just play all the time. So for that reason, birth causes difficulty. It causes more complexity. So it's the nature of the material world that there's always disturbance. But it's also the nature of the material. The nature of that nature of the material world is designed by the controllers of the material world, and ultimately Krishna, the supreme controller. It's designed to be like that. It's designed to be a source of disturbance and a source of frustration, because it's designed to help us understand that it's never going to be our permanent home. It will never satisfy us. So the Srila Prabhupada's books are really amazing in the sense that they give us description of the physical nature in great detail, but without us becoming intoxicated into thinking that we can make a permanent settlement here. So I'll stop there just for the time being to see if there's any questions. Are there any questions? Anyone have any questions?
Seems like in adulthood, people want to just enjoy as well, just like a child. And because of that, just as a child doesn't know how things are working, so he doesn't know if he's unaware that he's causing maybe causing destruction to his activities, or even suicide, on the road to killing himself, maybe even, with these activities. So it's similarly, and in adulthood, people don't know what they're doing, they just want to enjoy, so they don't know that, they wait till it's too late to realise, oh, the planet's in a mess, and maybe I should do something about it. But even then, there's the sense of enjoyment, want to enjoy so strong that it doesn't become a priority.
Yes, well, this is why Krishna has designed or created the Varnashram system, and he's actually understanding that nature of the living entity is that nature to want to enjoy is the natural nature of the living entity, because the constitutional nature, the swarup, the real nature of every living being is to be in bliss, is to be always blissful and in ever increasing bliss, always increasing in their happiness and their always experiencing great satisfaction. That is the nature of the living entity, to want that. So, understanding that, then there is a system throughout the universe whereby living entities can experience some happiness by entering into family life. And sharing the happiness of their children, and also taking on responsibility and gaining a higher satisfaction of taking on responsibility and rising to challenges and overcoming difficulties, and sharing those difficulties with the wider community, forming educational establishments to help the next generation. So it's not exactly bliss, but it's a sense of belonging to a community, it's a sense of progressive development of the next generation. So throughout history, governments have understood that this process of building communities is very important to retain a kind of stability in society. So that's why it's there. But it's also ultimately to help the older generation come to the realization that this responsibility and this drive for achievement and this drive to assist the next generation, it doesn't actually really bring happiness or satisfaction, and there's a lot of frustration there also. And there's also the anxiety of having to bring up children and to understand that the parents can't protect the children. You know, that the world is a very dangerous place, not because people are not really because people are trying to hurt each other, but because they're all at different stages of development, and therefore there's constant conflict between different communities, different societies, different countries that have different geographical challenges to face. Then they can never really come to an agreement. And like, even though COVID and climate change in one sense is providing a forum for conflicting parties to come together, and it may well bring out some good qualities, but ultimately it's doomed to failure. Well, for one thing, because people get old, and the people who are most experienced and have the greatest contribution to offer to the dialogue, by the time they get to that stage, they're just about to die. And then they have to hand it on to less experienced people who've got more ambition and who are more inclined to take it as a career rather than as a sacrifice. Anyway, there's so many dynamics, and I mean, society goes through different stages of different paradigms, you know, which have been described as traditional, modern, postmodern. But as we see, although Srila Prabhupada was aware of all of those different paradigms, because he understood that in the Vedic society there's 6 or 7 what are called darshans, or 6 or 7 ways of seeing the absolute truth. And all of those, and the teachers of those different schools, they all take their references from the Vedas, but they interpret the Vedas in different ways. And all of those schools of philosophy are like eternally existent, and they come and they rise and fall at different times in history. So what we call traditional, modern, postmodern, or what we might call socialist or social democrat, or fascist, or whatever philosophies that may appear to be replacing older philosophies, they're all eternal varieties of these different kinds of intellectual paradigms by which the scholars interpret the Vedas. So Srila Prabhupada was aware of all that. Actually, one of his disciples, one of his most intelligent disciples, Tamal Krishna Goswami, who actually became a PhD in comparative religion in a Christian university in Mississippi. Then he described Srila Srila Prabhupada's writing as the dance of the dexterous hermeneutes. So ISKCON, our governing body, has a department of hermeneutics, by which some of our scholars, literary academics, understand the way language is changing in society and how we have to learn different ways of communicating with different communities, not just in terms of translating into different foreign languages, but in terms of translating into the way that particular academic disciplines describe things. So you use different language in philosophy, psychology, sociology, linguistics. They all have their own languages. So Tamal Krishna Goswami described Srila Prabhupada that he was performing the dance of the dexterous hermeneutes, that he knew all of these languages, and he knew that they were all eternal, they were all eternally existing, and he was using them at different. So just like when we're reading in the Lilamrita, he's speaking to his disciples in a very challenging way, bringing out all of the controversies and really hitting them really hard with very cutting and non-compromising arguments. But another, he was capable of moving from that way of speaking to speaking with a visiting governor of Delhi in a very sort of politically correct way and according to protocol. And then he would speak with his godbrothers from the language of pure devotional service. So he was aware of all of these different ways of explaining the same reality. In like modern linguistics or modern political theory, this is described as being able to speak different narratives, that being able to create a whole kind of story, like extracting certain elements from history, certain elements from the political environment, and creating a sort of storyline which will appeal to a particular audience, often just to collect political votes, but also sometimes to help change the behaviour of society. So, for example, sociologists and behavioural scientists who are now trying to approach the difficult task of changing people's behaviour to respond to the crisis of climate change. So they're actually trying to create a narrative which like the general public can feel kind of part of, that like creating a story that they'll feel connected to. So that narrative will actually be, it will emphasize certain things way above their actual real significance, and it will completely ignore other things. So this is the way great teachers have helped us throughout the generations. They've understood that we have to understand that there is an absolute truth, and that absolute truth is presented in the Vedas. But it's the duty of all teachers to understand how to use the different narratives, or as it's described in the Vedic literature, the different darshans. So darshan means the way of seeing the truth. So how to use the different Vedic darshans to enliven people to fulfill their responsibilities in life, especially in terms of looking after less strong living entities like animals and children and old people and disabled people, and at the same time to be enlivened by the narrative, that it gives them some strength and enthusiasm, and it gives them a sense of appreciation that they're part of such a wonderful culture. And it also gives them the incentive to practice the spiritual discipline very seriously. And by doing that, they will become blissful, they will become inspired, and then when they pass on that knowledge to the next generation or to whoever they meet, then even if there's a difficulty in understanding the language, the actual bliss will be communicated, or the compassion will be communicated. So we've got a great opportunity now in this time of pandemic and climate change, disaster, to offer the skills which we've acquired from this tradition, this very great academic tradition of studying the Vedas from different angles, understanding all of the different angles, and being able to present according to the particular time, place, and circumstance. Just like here, Javat, he's basically, in one sense, he's presenting impersonal philosophy to Maharaj Rahugana, saying that everything is just made from the same substance, earth, and they're all named differently. So this is an argument that's actually used by impersonalists, that ultimately everything is the same. So, so what's the need to come to the temple? Because everything is just made from the same substance, so why don't you just worship in your own heart? Why do you need to worship in the temple? What's the need of hierarchies? Everything's all ultimately the same. So this is kind of like a very impersonalist presentation. It's one of the Vedic presentations, and it has its place. It has its place to wake people up who've become too emotionally attached to particular, perhaps the shape of their body, or the beauty of their children, or the wealth of their nation. They've become too attached to these things, thinking that they're going to bring them eternal happiness. So this kind of argument that everything is ultimately made of the same substance, it's used as a particular weapon, but it's not the absolute truth. The absolute truth is that everything actually is different, because everything is personal, everything has personality, and everything has a unique relationship with the Supreme. And we also have a unique relationship. However, that unique relationship is covered by our attachment to earth in the form of, our body, in the form of money, in the form of this planet even. So, yes, although it's good that we're attached to communicating with people who are concerned about the planet, but we shouldn't allow our concern for the planet to block our concern for the real happiness of the living entity, which can only be achieved by giving up their attachment to the planet. However, we can be attached to serving the planet, because the planet is one of the energies of Krishna. And how Krishna chooses to reciprocate with that endeavour to look after the planet, that's up to Krishna. Just like in the Battle of Kurukshetra, Arjuna wanted to protect his relatives. Krishna says he can't really protect them just by physical means, because everyone's going to die anyway. But he said, Krishna says, just surrender unto me. I'll protect you from all sinful reaction. So you may say, well, Arjuna fought for Krishna, but still everybody was killed. So how was that protecting everyone from sinful reaction? Well, we don't always understand exactly how it works out, and sometimes it may take a long time. We'll never understand all of the details. So, I'll stop there. It's a very, very complex subject matter. And, but we don't have to understand all of the complexities. But it's good to discuss them in the association of devotees, and it's always good to learn as much Shastra as we can, to learn as many of the direct instructions that Krishna has given to his devotees. So, in our tradition, the Bhagavad Gita is the most quoted Shastra. The Srimad Bhagavatam is as important, if not more important, than the Bhagavad Gita, but because the Bhagavad Gita is comparatively very short, and then we can profit greatly from learning the shlokas from the Bhagavad Gita, as Srila Prabhupada quotes constantly in his books and in his lectures. And in this way, even if people don't necessarily accept the intellectual basis of the argument, but if they're hearing Shastra, then they're being benefited. And also, it means we're actually following the instruction of Lord Chaitanya, who said that wherever we go, we should teach Krishna Upadesh. We should give people Krishna's teachings. So we can do that by presenting the verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Kodanatai Mai Prasya ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Natmoti Vaishnavinda ki jai.